We need a DNA test immediately. For a second, I thought Eric was joking. I was still shaking from labor, barely able to sit upright, when the nurse placed our newborn in the bassinet beside my bed. My mother stood near the window wiping tears from her cheeks. I expected my husband to reach for our son. Instead, Eric stared down at him like he was examining evidence. "He's too good-looking to be mine," he said with a smirk. Nobody laughed. I looked at him. "Eric, are you seriously accusing me of cheating right now?" "I'm saying I want proof." The nurse lowered her eyes. My mother whispered his name in disbelief, but Eric kept going. "And don't put my name on anything until we know." Something inside me hardened. "You watched me carry this baby for 9 months. And you worked late plenty of nights." That was when I realized this wasn't some cruel joke. My husband had taken ordinary moments from my pregnancy and quietly turned them into a case against me. "Fine," I said, "do the test." Eric's eyebrows lifted. I wanted the accusation dead, permanently. The nurse hesitated. "Mrs. White, you don't have to make this decision right now." "I want it done." Eric leaned back in his chair, strangely relaxed. That bothered me more than the accusation. He wasn't behaving like a husband, terrified that his wife had betrayed him. He looked like a man, waiting for something he'd already arranged. The nurse brought the testing supplies closer and reached into the bassinet. I looked down at the tiny baby bundled beneath the hospital blanket. Noah, the name Eric and I had chosen together months earlier. The nurse gently lifted his wrist and scanned the electronic identification tag. A sharp beep sounded. She frowned. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Probably nothing." She scanned it again. Another error. Eric answered before she could. "Machines malfunction. Just take the sample." The nurse slowly looked at him. "I need to verify his identification first." Eric's jaw tightened. "You know which baby he is." "Hospital protocol says I verify it." She checked the number printed on the bassinet, then compared it with something on her tablet. Her expression changed. My mother stepped closer. "Is there a problem?" "I'll be right back." The nurse walked out carrying the tablet. I turned toward Eric. He was watching the doorway. Not Noah. Not me. The doorway. "Why aren't you worried?" I asked. His eyes snapped toward mine. "About what?" "About any of this." He gave a small shrug. "Because the test will tell us what we need to know." There was something unsettling about the certainty in his voice. Minutes passed. Then the door opened again. The nurse returned, but she wasn't alone. Another staff member followed her inside. Neither woman explained anything. The second nurse walked directly to Noah's bassinet, checked the number underneath it, then examined the electronic tag around the baby's wrist. The first nurse whispered something I couldn't hear. Eric stood. "What's going on?" Neither answered him. And as I watched my husband's face, I noticed something I couldn't explain. For the first time since demanding the DNA test, Eric didn't look offended. He looked impatient, almost as if he already knew what that test was supposed to say. And suddenly, one question wouldn't leave my mind. Why did my husband look like he already knew Noah wasn't going to match him? The moment the nurses finally left with the samples, I turned to Eric. "When did you start believing Noah wasn't yours?" Eric didn't look at me. He stood by the window, scrolling through his phone as though we were waiting for routine blood work instead of a test that could destroy our marriage. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters." He finally looked up. "If you've been faithful, Tracy, you have nothing to fear." I stared at him. That sentence told me everything his smirk hadn't. He didn't want reassurance. He wanted me frightened. "You came to my appointments," I said. "You watched every ultrasound. You picked Noah's name with me. You never accused me of anything." Eric slipped his phone into his pocket. "People hide things." "What exactly do you think I've hidden?" Instead of answering, he pulled his chair closer. If the test proves something happened, we'll have decisions to make. What decisions? The marriage, the house, our accounts. I froze. Eric continued almost clinically. Adultery changes things when lawyers get involved. That didn't sound like a devastated husband discovering a betrayal. It sounded rehearsed. During my final months of pregnancy, Eric had insisted on handling almost every financial decision because I was too stressed. He controlled our joint accounts, bills, and household paperwork. Now he was talking about divorce before the DNA results had even returned. Then another memory hit me. After Noah was born, Eric had disappeared. Nearly 40 minutes. He'd told me he was getting coffee. Where did you go earlier? His expression tightened. I told you. For coffee. Yes. For 40 minutes. Eric stepped closer to my bed. You're exhausted, Tracy. Don't start inventing things. Before I could answer, the door opened. The doctor entered carrying a folder. I immediately searched her face. Do you have the results? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the nurse behind her. Please take the newborn back to the nursery. My stomach dropped. Why? Eric stood quickly. Hold on. Nobody's taking him anywhere until you tell us what that test says. The nurse lifted the bassinet handle. Eric moved toward the door. The doctor stepped directly into his path. Then, without raising her voice, she reached behind herself and locked the door. What are you doing? Eric demanded. Before the doctor could answer, someone knocked. She unlocked the door just long enough to admit the charge nurse and a hospital administrator, then closed it again. Eric looked from one face to another. Why is everyone acting like I've committed a crime? I gripped the edge of my blanket. Doctor, please, just tell me what the test says. She opened the folder. The initial result does not establish Eric as this baby's biological father. Silence. Then Eric turned toward me. His expression transformed instantly. I knew it. Eric. I knew it. His voice carried into the hallway. My mother stepped between us. She just gave birth. Lower your voice. But Eric pointed at me. All those late nights at work, every time you said I was paranoid. Mr. White, the doctor interrupted, I haven't finished. Eric grabbed his jacket from the chair. What else is there to finish? The test proved it. Something about the doctor's expression stopped me. She wasn't looking at me with suspicion. She looked concerned. Does the test say I had this baby with another man? I asked. The doctor paused. The laboratory found an inconsistency that requires immediate verification. Eric scoffed. That's convenient. The administrator stepped forward. Mr. White, where were you for approximately 40 minutes after your son's delivery? Eric's head snapped toward him. What does that have to do with anything? Please answer. I went downstairs for coffee. The administrator glanced at the tablet in his hand. Your visitor badge records don't support that. For the first time, Eric had no immediate comeback. What are you accusing me of? No accusation has been made. I want a lawyer. Eric reached for the door. Please remain here, the administrator said. You can't hold me because my wife cheated. The doctor's phone vibrated. She looked down. Read the message. Then read it again. The room became unnaturally still. What? I whispered. She raised her eyes to me first. Then she looked directly at Eric. Her expression had changed completely. Mr. White, she said slowly, we need to call security now. Eric reached the door before anyone could stop him. Move. The administrator stepped in front of it. Mr. White, you need to remain on this floor while we investigate an infant identification discrepancy. I'm leaving. 2 staff members appeared in the corridor. Eric stopped. I barely noticed them. One phrase had swallowed everything else. Infant identification discrepancy. I looked at the doctor. Where is Noah? She came closer to my bed. Tracy, listen carefully. The laboratory found something beyond the paternity result. My fingers tightened around the blanket. What? The infant we tested doesn't match your delivery blood records either. For several seconds, I couldn't process the words. Then I looked toward the empty space where the bassinet had been. No. We're verifying everything. No, that's my baby. We don't believe the infant who was brought into this room is biologically yours. My chest tightened. Suddenly, the scanner error wasn't a malfunction. Eric's 40-minute disappearance wasn't about coffee. And his confidence about the DNA test wasn't confidence at all. He had expected a mismatch. Where is my son? The doctor immediately activated the hospital's infant security protocol. Doors on the maternity unit were secured. Nursery identification records were checked against electronic tags and delivery files. Then came another discovery. A newborn assigned to another family was carrying identification connected to my delivery record. Both Bobbies were immediately secured for medical examination and identity verification. I turned toward Eric. What did you do? Nothing. You knew that test wouldn't match. The hospital screwed something up. The administrator's tablet chimed. He read the screen. We've identified another access issue. Eric went silent. A maternity orderly named Marcus Reed entered a restricted nursery area shortly after Mr. White left this room. I watched the color drain from Eric's face. Marcus, I repeated. Eric said nothing. Hospital security arrived and began reviewing footage from the corridor. The supervisor stood over a laptop while the doctor watched. Then he stopped the video, rewound it, played it again. Eric took one step backward. The supervisor immediately looked toward the guards. I tried to sit higher. What did you see? Nobody answered me. Please, where is Noah? The supervisor turned the laptop away from Eric and spoke sharply before I could ask another question. Nobody let her husband leave this floor. What did you see? I demanded. The security supervisor didn't answer immediately. He spoke quietly to the administrator, then two guards moved closer to Eric. The doctor came to my bedside. Tracy, we've completed the identification checks. I couldn't stop staring at the empty space where the bassinet had been. Where is Noah? He's safe. My breath caught. She continued carefully. The infant who was brought into your room is biologically related to neither you nor Eric. I stared at her. So Eric isn't the father because that wasn't your baby. My mother covered her mouth. The doctor explained that the electronic tags, delivery records, and repeat identification checks showed that two newborn bassinet identities had been deliberately interfered with. Another family had been given Noah under incorrect identification. Neither baby had left the secured maternity unit. And Noah, I asked. We've confirmed him through the delivery records and identification checks. We're bringing him to you. Across the room, Eric suddenly said, This is the hospital's mistake. The security supervisor turned toward him. No, Mr. White. He rotated the laptop. The footage showed Eric leaving my room after Noah's birth. Then Eric appeared near a staff-only corridor. He wasn't alone. Marcus Reed, a maternity orderly, stood beside him. Another clip showed Marcus entering the restricted nursery area minutes later. Eric's face went pale. You met him, I whispered. Eric shook his head. You don't know what you're looking at. The administrator answered. We also have access records showing Mr. Reed entered the nursery during the relevant period. The investigation uncovered the rest through records and messages. Eric had paid Marcus. The plan had existed before I ever entered that delivery room. Eric wanted another newborn temporarily presented as ours. Then he would demand a DNA test, obtain the mismatch he already knew would appear, and use it as supposed proof that I'd cheated. He intended to turn that accusation into leverage while ending our marriage, over the house, our savings, and everything else he'd mentioned while we waited for the results. That was why he had been so calm. That was why he'd disappeared. That was why he'd pushed for the test immediately. And that was why the doctor had called security. Not because the DNA test proved Eric wasn't Noah's father. Because it proved the baby being tested wasn't mine either. "You risked 2 bobbies for this?" I asked. Eric finally looked at me. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I almost couldn't believe those were the words he'd chosen. "You switched newborns." I didn't switch anyone. Marcus was supposed to handle it temporarily. Nobody was supposed to. He stopped. Too late. The room went silent. Eric had just admitted he knew. Then the door opened. A nurse entered pushing a bassinet. Everything else disappeared. I recognized the blanket first. Then the tiny face I'd seen immediately after delivery. Noah. The nurse brought him to me only after the final identification checks had been completed. When she placed him against my chest, I held him with both arms and pressed my cheek against his head. Eric stepped toward us. "Tracy." "Don't." He stopped. "Don't touch him. Don't touch me. Please. Just let me explain. You used our son and another family's baby to manufacture evidence against me. I made a mistake." "No, you made a plan." Security escorted Eric from the room while police were contacted. Marcus was detained as the hospital preserved the surveillance footage, electronic access logs, identification records, and messages connected to what had happened. The evidence followed Eric long after we left that maternity floor. I separated from him immediately. With an attorney's help, I preserved every hospital record for the custody proceedings and reviewed the finances Eric had insisted on controlling during my pregnancy. I moved my money out of accounts he controlled and challenged suspicious transfers he'd made while preparing to leave me. The scheme that was supposed to give Eric leverage destroyed his credibility instead. He lost the marriage he'd tried to manipulate. He lost access to our home. And he lost the control over me that I'd spent years mistaking for protection. Months later, Noah and I were living separately from Eric. Our home was quieter. My finances were mine to manage. And tucked among Noah's important documents was the legitimate DNA report confirming exactly what should never have needed proving. I didn't keep it because I doubted who Noah's father was. I kept it because of what that test ultimately exposed. Eric had begun that day standing over my hospital bed, demanding that I prove I hadn't betrayed our family. By the end of it, he was the one being escorted away while I held our son. Eric demanded proof that Noah was his son. What he gave me instead was proof that he could never be my husband again.